let's go straight to business. There's 7 political recommendations from our partners from EU that Ukraine was supposed to fulfill in order to start the accession negotiations so that we would become a fully fledged member nation. The June's report on this recommendation said that we've accomplished 2 and we've achieved significant progress on 5 recommendations. So in October there will be a final report, and then they will say whether we are ready for the accession negotiations or not. It's just a couple of months till October. So what would you say? What are we going to receive from our partners on those 7 recommendations? What would be the feedback? Well, greetings everyone, civil society, ambassadors, government, audience. It's great to see so many friendly and familiar faces here. So today we are having this conference before the beginning of a political season in the European capitals, in Brussels. We talked many times on our political calendar, which provides for our ambition to start the accession negotiation in this December, and it's important to synchronize our efforts. I can tell you for sure that in October we will not be hearing that we have fulfilled all the 7 recommendations 100%, because we're talking about the fundamental transformations in the state related to human rights, to the de-oligarchization process. It is thanks to the Ukrainian initiative this process has become one of the pillars for the fundamental democratic reforms. Now the Georgia and Moldova have the same commitments. Now those are the changes that shall be implemented for years, but surely we will fulfill all the legislative steps required until October. Hopefully we'll open the doors for a political decision. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that it's a bit more complicated for Ukraine than for other countries on their way to EU, not because of the war, but because of the fact that we are moving to the EU while reforming the EU at the same time. That's why we're in the constant negotiations, so that those 7 recommendations would not be increased, because in the course of implementation of anti-corruption events there is a need for additional steps to implement the anti-corruption strategy, funding of anti-corruption bodies and many other activities, but they should not be part of the political process. That's why we'll have a large synchronization process. I'm planning to visit Brussels in the beginning of September, where I will have some very important negotiations, but I would like to extend words of gratitude to Ukrainian Parliament and the government. And the Parliament is currently working in an extraordinary fashion in order to have a very effective legislative process. Therefore, we'll have a solid background on each of 7 recommendations. 2 recommendations have already been fulfilled, and hopefully we'll have more of them fulfilled. So you're expecting for a political decision to be yes. And you've mentioned that there's a complex of issues, for example, the anti-corruption legislation that needs to be resolved, but there is some simple tracks, for example, to restore the electronic declarations, and so far we haven't heard anything about this. We have Mr. Kornienko with us today, here. And not only Mr. Kornienko, but what's your point as the Vice Prime Minister? What's your vision? What's the status with the electronic declaration? Will we be able to fulfill this recommendation by October? Not only this recommendation. Well, this is important, and we'll be able to make everything in time. Already the draft law passed the first reading. I would like to remind 2015, when we've installed the e-declaration process, we were trying to get a visa-free regime, And today, the legislation which is already registered, it will be passed to voting. It will take into account the mistakes of previous political decisions that were taken too fast at certain cases. So it's a parliamentary process. I have no doubts with our MPs. We'll have a coordinated work on the 7 political criteria, and just last week the president, the parliament and the government have identified the list of activities that we shall pursue, and e-declaration is one of them. This law will be passed, and today we'll have 3 major panel discussions, and all the speakers have a very decisive role in taking political decisions and fulfilling the goals that we shall be mentioning today. That is why big gratitude to all of my counterparts and colleagues. We have a coordinated process with the European Commission and with the IMF on the common vision to anti-corruption activities and the format for restoring the e-declaration with due consideration of the security measures, with due consideration of the martial law period. But this legislation, together with other anti-corruption laws, will be passed. Among the major achievements of Ukrainian government is the self-screening. That's a very complicated term, but it means that the government in just a couple of months have managed to analyze 27,000, that's if I remember correctly, 27,000 regulations and acts of the EU, if they're aligned with the Ukrainian legislation, and then every ministry has identified the Ukrainian legislation that needs amendments in order to be aligned with the EU legislation. That sounds kind of a lot of work. And why we were doing that and not the EU? Because that's their legislation. They
know what will be harmonized. How can we manage actually within a couple of months just to analyze everything? How did that happen? So for me, it's a little bit of controversy. Just convince me. I want to be convinced it's not like that. Okay, we already have a success story. The candidacy status, less than 2 months. We took like filling out all the documents which are analyzed for years by European Commission. And on the basis of this information that was prepared by a government and civic society, we call the Book of Governance, we made this political decision. So when we presented this initiative to start self-screening, as we call it, we had no doubts. You know, we were very confident. We have a very powerful system of coordination. We have the government, and the governmental office is functioning, coordinating the state agencies in each ministry. We have a deputy minister on your integration. Colleagues, congratulations. This is our big job, big work we've done. Cooperation with civic society, technical assistance projects, and ministries were involved in the analysis. So why we started the process, this is one of the key elements of our political strategy. For so many times we claimed these political deadlines for our readiness to enter the EU. We spoke so many times that our strategy is first and foremost that the pace of movement towards EU, we will decide what it would be based on political decisions. Democracy, rule of law, the fundamental basics that we need to move forward, and also at each stage of negotiation. So in fact, if in December we started negotiations, the European Commission has to start official screening of our legislation. For the countries joining EU, this process took like years in that case. But if we take the 10-year experience of implementing the association agreement, we managed to start the process. Before the European Commission presents the report in October, not only about economic criteria, we will present another book of governance, future governance, which will present the evaluation of our readiness to enter the EU, the list of steps that should be taken. So there will be European screening, an additional one. Okay. So you said the pace of moving, the speed of moving towards EU. We decided Do we sacrifice quality for quantity? I'll tell you what I mean. So we speak of the speed. We all the time we say fast and furious, 7 stages. But do we have a clear vision and understanding, we as Ukraine, what we will be in EU? What we will look like as a post-war country with economy? What sectors will die, what sectors will emerge? This is about the detailed negotiation about our membership, and so far we are still in the war. We can't have any specific discussions about it. In private conversations, Europeans say, what economy shall we deal with later? You know, Ukrainian economy. So do you have an impression that for the sake of this speed, we will just formally stick to EU requirements by sacrificing our interests? We still don't realize it fully, you know, because we don't have the victory, unfortunately. Now, yes, thank you for the question, but it somehow is similar to the NATO question I heard. Euro-Atlantic integration is a part of my portfolio. When we heard from international partners that they don't know how exactly Ukraine will join NATO, but in order to talk about it, we have first of all to make a decision. So there are 2 principal statements that we have, 2 key ideas. For us to protect our national interests, to build the competitive economy and to be competitive, you know, to be a competitive member of EU and contributor to internal market, we have to start negotiations. And for that, respectively, we're moving very fast. That's why we're moving fast, you know, to ensure that we have political conformity and that there is a chance to make that decision. So basically, we take December 2023 as the last chance to make the last political decision on Ukraine's movement towards EU. Opening the later we'll have serious negotiations opened. We will not move so fast. From the standpoint of legislation adaptation, we will move dynamically when it comes to negotiation process. But we shall not sacrifice the key issues which are very essential for Ukraine. If this is about to be the subject of negotiation. So if it comes to some essential issues, there are no deadlines. When it comes to essential issues for Ukraine, we already think about it. At the London conference, the president of the European Commission, she presented a financial plan for 50 billion to ensure recovery and restoration of Ukraine. So this plan is, let's say, the basis for Ukraine to become a competitive country, competitive economy inside the EU. This is the membership, let's say, the part of the membership plan. So before even the membership, we will start this serious transformation. But there are a lot of issues and aspects which do require dialogue, or even together with business, with Ukrainian national producers. We'll have to talk about it. During the conference today, you'll get some self-screening results already, and we just have to understand that EU membership stipulates that we have to leave all the agreements, terminate all the agreements, bilateral agreements that we do have. We will become the part of internal market of the EU, a part of their free trade zone. These transitional periods should be identified. This will be the subject of negotiation. We have negative experience, political acceleration. You know, when it comes to World Trade Organization joining, it's really hard right now to revise those requirements. So without clear support, without realization, without this broad consensus, we will not have any political negotiations, which may lower our capacity as the part of internal market. So why am I asking? Because we have the crash test with the EU right now when it comes to agricultural products. 5 countries asked to limit, after September 15th, to limit the scope of our products exported to EU, and we haven't started the negotiation. When negotiation starts, it will be even worse. So how can we protect and defend their interests? Won't we sacrifice the interests of Ukrainian business just for the sake of the aim to get into the EU very quickly? Agriculture is an interesting thing, an interesting sector. It's an interesting story because it's a big cluster of economy that will emerge in EU internal market. It's one thing, but on the other hand, In the first discussion, together with Mr. Kornienko, we will have Mr. Adam with us, Macron's advisor, and right now France is the leader in the discourse on EU reforming. And the EU logic is not, current logic, is not to destroy the Ukrainian agriculture even before we become the part of the internal market. But the discourse goes like that. European Union has to reform its agricultural policy to be ready to integrate Ukraine in internal market. So these are really, really important discussions. That's why I'm saying it's not just that we are joining and transforming for the sake of membership. The EU itself realizing that this is a political decision, serious political decision. They understand that we will become a part of EU and we will not be the party, dragging everyone down to the bottom. So they already start internal transformation. The case with Poland, for us, it has become a certain lesson, due to certain factors. First, we realize that we have to step back from some extreme economic theories. We have to find our own place and niche in a big market, in a big family. And this would be a hard process. It will be a hard task. So second thing, we understand everyone has to get the same rules. Yeah? And at the expense of Ukraine, we will not let anyone win at the expense of Ukraine. Win the elections, manipulate with some political, ideas, or get some additional financial instruments. During the crisis, I just want to remind you, the crisis inspired by a couple of countries which are members of the EU, and Poland is inspiring the most. Poland got 2 additional elements of funding to support their agriculture. And the budget for the border guard for the border guard service, it tripled. Ukraine got nothing. And by the way, in the EU, they don't have a financial mechanism which would compensate us the losses that we have. So for us, this is really, really important, an important lesson for the future negotiations. An important lesson when it comes to access to financial instruments before we become the full member of the EU, and the understanding that a lot of support we have from Polish government and Polish people, Polish citizens, it also may be spoiled a little bit with these political and economic and trade issues. So this is a lesson for us, We know that European Commission has a very clear intention to terminate these limitations. After September 15th, we have some threats on unilateral measures to be taken, but we do understand that this is serious violations of the rules. If we want to stay in the EU family, so they violate their own rules. I do hope that Brussels will find some ways to impact their members, to explain that this is actually this is the worst way, and they will explain that you can't win any political campaign at the expense of our agriculture. So the last question, twice you mentioned the big family metaphor when it comes to the EU. It's a good thing. It's a good metaphor. And like in any big family, many things happen. People have feuds, arguments, they reconcile, they negotiate, but it's not even, I'm not interested in arguments right now. Shall this big family, will they be willing to become even bigger, more extended? For example, the head of the Supreme Court has allegations on corruption, and also other officials. Every month we have some corruption scandals in the parliament, regular corruption-related scandals in the ministries, and it's just the top of the iceberg, okay? It's something I can remember as of now. So how will the big family take that? Okay, so you mentioned the head of the Supreme Court. While in a couple of days after this event, I was in Brussels. I was staying there, and I just want to draw your attention to the following. This assessment is positive because all these allegations, all this public information that we have, it's a result of anti-corruption bodies functioning. The government launched that. The parliament launched that as well. So they function, they do their job. less than in a month, when after we took the candidacy status, got the candidacy status, so the specialized anti-corruption prosecution, the head of the specialized anti-corruption prosecution, was presented. The first thing he heard from the government and other state agencies, it's his responsibility to show the results of fighting the corruption, and anti-corruption bodies, they do that very well. And we also speak about electronic declaration, an anti-corruption strategy. So, in my opinion, in the capitals where the political decisions shall be made, they have a clear understanding that anti-corruption infrastructure is active, corruption is being countered, and at the level of systemic measures, we'll talk about de-oligarchization, but in a much more broad context, not about personally like fighting some individuals and canceling some individuals, but how to avoid this at the national level, to have equal opportunities for everyone. So, of course, these cases are unpleasant. It's really unpleasant when the colleagues, are involved in that, or let's say top officials from the already reformed agencies, but we were prepared for it, and this is just what it tells us, that everybody can be punished for any violation in Ukraine. We'll hope everybody will be punished for the violations. So the Vice Prime Minister on European Atlantic integration, Olha,